I've never said this publicly, so this is going to be new and on your show. I think it's ego. I think it's pure ego, because you're right. It's hubris to buy something for somebody else and then say, go do an exceptional job. Practitioners don't talk to other practitioners about what's working and what's not working. So you've got this imperfect information on one side. Secondly, software in HR and in TA is sold, not purchased. So I think one of the things to do when you're evaluating software, like, so, Will, how do you sort through this? How do you make sense of all this language coming at you, and like which one works and doesn't work? The first thing you need to do, if you're really serious after you do a demo, is talk to their clients. Talk to people using the software, not that bought the software, but that using the software.
Hi there, Denise Chaffin here, host of Talking TA. And this morning I am honored to have my new friend, William Tincup with WRKdefined as my guest. And William and I are going to have a conversation. I think we talked about maybe a couple different topics, right? Sourcing, talent acquisition sourcing, and also outplacement. So I'm very curious to have a conversation with you around that, because it just has not been a topic of conversation at all since I started podcasting. So
really, okay.
Yeah. So William, I'm going to go ahead and let you introduce yourself and give us a little bit of background about who you are.
Sure. William Tincup. I've been in the HR TA space 20 plus years. I've spoken at a lot of conferences, done a lot of webinars, done a lot of podcasts, probably over 3,000 episodes. So a lot of podcasting, a lot of talking. Evidently, I like to hear myself talk, which I don't. I absolutely hate my voice. So that's kind of weird. But I'm kind of at that intersection of technology and the profession. So whatever practitioners do, I've never worked a desk in HR. I've never worked a desk in TA per se. I did it as a business owner of 3 different businesses. So I've done it. I've done all the activities, but not like I want it to be. I want the audience to make sure that I'm coming across clear. I've never been a chief people officer or a global head of TA. I've had to do a bunch of hiring. I mean, when I worked for Walmart, probably hired a couple thousand people. So, I mean, I've hired and I've sourced and trained and like done all the aspects of HR, but I fell in love with the technology that drives talent acquisition and HR. And I also fell in love with practitioners on both sides, both HR and TA, for different reasons. So yeah, that's it. I mean, I'm super easy to find on the internet. Just
Yeah,
type in
you
William
are.
Tincup and you'll find me. Good, bad, or otherwise, you'll find me.
Like I said, we haven't really had a lot of conversation around talent acquisition sourcing. And I was at Transform. Well, there were a lot of companies there, though, that were selling software. AI software, a lot. New companies that are startups, and a lot of them want to take over sourcing for the talent acquisition industry. A lot of them say, we're not trying to take over people's jobs. We're trying to help the recruiting and talent acquisition industry to streamline, to make themselves more efficient, which we all appreciate.
I think they believe that. Yeah, I think they believe that.
I do. And I think that there is a lot of validity to that. But I also, as I was looking and as I have been demoing software for a lot of these companies that I met, because they've asked me, since I have been a lifelong recruiter here, they've asked me to demo their products. And there are some pieces, though, that are still missing from the AI and from the tools, the software tools. But one of the things, some of the notes I have made about sourcing tools that aren't, I mean, you can't do employee referrals using AI tools yet.
The bit is think of, like, you and I grew up in a world where we had schedulers, right? we grew up in that world where there was a person, Jim, Dorothy, whatever, and their job, full time, legit, was to line up interviews for the hiring manager, for the recruiter, for the first interview, for this, that, and the other. And it's been years, but there's a bot that can do that. That could go and look at your calendar, my calendar, his calendar, Jimmy's calendar, and then sync it all up with the calendar of the candidate and make a calendar event. And that can be done in seconds. So like we can look at, and that's an example, but there's many examples like this where there's things that are, I mean, I think it's probably harsh to say, but I'll use this for phrase in any low value task, things that you and I should never do, that we might have even thought was our job, like very humanistic. Let me call.
Well, it used to be.
Yeah.
Well, we didn't. Well, and it's interesting, but when I was working years ago for Motorola and on semiconductor, we did all of our own scheduling, to your point, and our own offer letters. And we weren't separated by sourcing, coordination, administration,
no.
and recruiting. A recruiting role
did the whole thing.
Did the whole thing. And when did we split that up? About what? How long ago did we split that up?
I'd say that in the early aughts. That's really when it kind of came to where they're starting to become specialists, especially as the advent of more and more technology got into our space.
Sure, that's true too.
I think you'd have to have somebody that ran the ATS. Okay, that wasn't a recruiter. It was more of a kind of a recruiting operations person. And then
that's
sourcing, right. You could be, especially in the staffing industry, I think you're still required to run a full desk, do the business development, do the candidate development, et cetera. I think that's still there. But in the corporate side, I think we just became specialists. There are good people that are with employer branding, recruitment marketing. There are good people that are just more skilled at finding talent. Like that's their bit. Like they're just great at they can find that purple squirrel in the purple forest and, wearing, all that stuff. And then there's just good people, that recruiters that are just great with candidates. They become like candidate advocates.
Or candidate closers.
Candidate closers.
Okay, that's a skill in itself.
If you were to just select that and say, bring all this other stuff to this person, and Janet,
that person will be a closer.
Janet comes in and she's a closer. I wouldn't hate that, because again, if you're thinking about the specialized skills that it takes, full cycle. Because you're still dealing with hiring managers. You're still having to convince them, talk to the team, build some type of idea around what is the job, what type of talent works in your team, how do we do this intake form, let me go out and figure out where I'm going to get that talent. Let me put some talent in front of you, you'll hate it all. Okay, great. Let me put some more talent in front of you, you'll hate some of that. Okay, great.
True.
Like I think with AI, where we are right now with AI, is it's looking for the lower value tasks that just should be automated. Like the humanity needs to and will exist in recruiting, full stop. It's just a question of where is that going to be placed, and that's the change that people are going through.
Well, and to your point though too, there's just different software that identifies different skill sets and different. It's looking for candidates for different jobs with different levels of skill, different education, different locations, different industries. And you do not have a one size fits all kind of software that's going to do all of it, right? And
No.
And as a company, like if I was working for, let's say Intel, or let's say a big hospital looking for nurses, how do I know which software is going to do what I need it to do ongoing, right?
So here's the hardest part of that question. Practitioners don't talk to other practitioners about what's working and what's not working. So you've got this imperfect information on one side. Secondly, software in HR and in TA is sold, not purchased. Meaning when you walked around the expo hall, there was a whole lot of marketing messages, a lot of sales messages that were going to you. Then you had to go back and sort out like what's reality, I don't understand. That doesn't happen in other industries. The buyer drives the sale. Something is purchased, like in fintech, it's absolutely purchased. They don't care about your marketing messages. They don't care about your sales strategy. They don't care about any of that stuff. They're buying software. You're not selling software. In our industry, is opposite. So I think one of the things to do when you're evaluating software, like, so to your question, well, how do you sort through this? How do you make sense of all this language coming at you, and like which one works and doesn't work? The first thing you need to do, if you're really serious after you do a demo, is talk to their clients. Talk to people using the software, not that bought the software, but that using the software.
Okay. Yeah. And here's another point too, and this has come up with some of our bigger clients. They have executives who are making the decisions to buy the software without having anybody test drive that software first who's going to be using the software.
It happens at the highest levels. So
why? Why is that?
Well,
it seems to me that should be common sense, to have the people who are going to use the software demo the software and use it for a while before making this huge financial commitment.
I've never said this publicly, so this is going to be new and on your show. I think it's ego. I think it's pure ego, because you're right. It's hubris to buy something for somebody else and then say, go do an exceptional job. Like, this isn't a Christmas gift and you give me a tie and I don't wear ties. Okay, well, I can donate that. But, you're giving me software and then telling me with no uncertain terms, you need to be exceptional. And you've not got my buy-in? Think about buying a car for somebody. You just bought a car for Heath. You have no idea what kind of car he needs, no idea what of his travel or any of that stuff, and you just bought him a car. Well, he'll be happy because it's a car. But is it?
Yeah.
But is it the car that he wanted
or can use? Yeah,
he can use.
Yeah.
Like he's a mile from his office. He doesn't need a car.
Right.
Now an electric bike.
Yeah,
cool.
would have been more practical. Yeah.
Right. He would love an electric bike or maybe even a scooter or something like that, Vespa. So you're absolutely right. And this happens at the enterprise level. The more egregious, I think, the further you go up market, the more egregious it is, because they're not even selling to HR or TA. They're selling to CFOs. So they're selling to the C-suite. C-suite says, yep, makes sense, because they're looking at supply chain and finance and HR and all of those things. They're saying, yeah, it'll work. Then it's basically given to HR, given to recruiting. And it's like, okay, again, if you didn't tether that to, oh, by the way, you have to be exceptional, I wouldn't care as much. But that's the expectation, is that you are getting inferior equipment and you're asked to do an exceptional job.
Right. And to utilize that software to its fullest capability, right?
Yeah, that's right.
And to train others how to use it.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
You not only have to be an expert, certified, all that stuff. Now everyone that touches the software, new people that come in a year later, just train them up. Okay, I still have a job to do. That's actually the most interesting facet of software that doesn't get talked about, is software isn't a part of the job. Like, you still have a job to do, like the job. Software is supposed to enable that success, not be the job.
Okay, so talking about that, there are companies too who are making these transitions. We talked about full desk recruiting, right? And they're breaking out their talent acquisition departments to, like you said earlier, you've got some positions that are for coordination or administration, some that are for sourcing, some that are for full desk. I remember the first time I worked as a sourcer, was hired as a contract sourcer, was at Intel in 2010. And their recruiters were actually called staffing consultants at the time.
Oh, cool. Interesting.
And so the staffing consultants were more like, I've also heard the term account managers for recruiters, because they're working with the hiring teams, and they're kind of doing the beginning stage, working with the hiring team on this requisition, engagement, and strategy, that type of thing. And then on the back end, closing the final candidates and doing the debrief meetings, that type of thing. And then you've got the sourcing team who's going out and doing that in the
Just go find the
plunge
talent. Yes.
to find candidates.
What was your tool back then? What did you use?
We were using back then Taleo.
Yeah. That's the
And
ATS.
so in 2010, LinkedIn was kind of a thing, but it was more just kind of getting started. So we were still using an ATS to find candidates. But the other thing that we were doing is we were doing Google searches at that time. Boolean Google searches.
Oh, yeah.
And this was before, some people were using, I think, Brass Ring and Career Builder and things like that.
Yeah.
But I didn't. For the types of positions we were working on, they were highly technical. So what we did for sourcing, what we did for sourcing back then is we worked with the hiring team, and we actually got names from them. And as they were hiring people, they would give us names from companies they wanted us to go after. And so we would actually contact people that we were still actually using an IEEE directory back then.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. 100%.
For some of the sourcing that we did.
And back then you could do phone sourcing where you would just call into the
Dialing for dollars, we called it. Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know why you called it that. But, I guess,
AI is taking over that.
Yeah, AI is taking over. But what though, I enjoyed the staffing consultant that I partnered with. His name is George Orrin. George, if you happen to see this, I miss you, my friend. He was so fun to work with, and we had a great relationship. And I think that for me, sourcing, being hired as a contract sourcer was fun because I got to do what I did best, which was sourcing candidates. But I think that that's really where I saw, for myself personally, the biggest distinction between a sourcing team and the recruiting team or staffing consultants or account management or whatever they call it. It depends on who you're working with. But I thought it was great. I thought it was great to divide the two.
Have you seen an individual that's great at both?
Yeah. I think they're still on the agency side.
Yes. No, I meant corporate. Yeah, agency, they're forced to.
Yeah.
They have
on
no
the
choice.
Corporate side, that's a good question. I guess, yeah. They're okay. And I'll give a shout out to Kelly Galley, who I worked with at Lion Research. She's good at both. She's a great sourcer and she's a great closer. And
So
she's now over at AMD, I guess. So anyway, AMD, you're lucky to have her. She's a great hire. Anyway, so there are people out there who are great at both. But I think that they're probably more, to your point though, William, they're people who were brought into the business a long time ago and had to do both and got trained.
Just got good at it.
Yeah, like Ian McKenzie said years ago, some of the best recruiters started out as agency recruiters and then transitioned into corporate.
I still believe that. I still, in my heart of hearts, believe that if you want to be really, really great, you start with the Manpowers, Kellys, and the Decos, all of those of the world. You go and do a bit, and you learn the business. You learn all of the business. And then when you go corporate, everything's easier when you go corporate.
Yeah. Yeah.
Compared to that nonsense, everything's easier, but I think it's just a great coming
plus
straight
you're
out
not
of
working
college.
on commission.
Right. Oh, yeah.
They're paying you for the time that you're working.
Right.
So
That's right.
You don't have that stress and that worry about making your next placement, and especially if you're working on contingency.
Oh yeah, no, you got dollar for dollars. You got to do the whole bit. And so I still think that holds true in terms of the best corporate recruiters come from. They have some form of staffing in their background.
Now, talking about the AI tools though that we're looking at now, and how they're going to help and maybe sustain sourcing from a sourcing standpoint. What's your take?
I think that the stuff with matching that you see right now is good. Maybe not great, but I think it does get great pretty quickly. And so it does basically, and it will be able to bubble up and say, okay, if your inputs are these, okay, fantastic, then the output should be these. We've already searched the internet, not just LinkedIn. We've already searched the internet, 500 million people or whatever the bid is. Here are the 5 candidates that you should talk to. We're not saying which ones are the best. We're saying these 5 meet and exceed the criteria that you set forth. You don't have to have a human being do that.
And it does make things more efficient. Yeah.
It does. It does.
But
It
I mean,
does.
if you were going to advise a company, a small, medium, big size company, when it comes to purchasing these tools, going back to what we were talking about, though, I mean, it would be worth their time to let their teams, though, be part of the decision-making process.
Oh my God. I think it's critical. I mean, having them, first of all, identify what's the problem. Because no one solution solves all the problems, right? So there's no magic bullet. So let's stop looking for one. But if your team says, Denise, it's quality of hire. This is where our biggest problem is we can get people in, we can get them here, but they don't stay and they don't produce in the way that we want them to. Okay, well, solving for quality of hire is a mixture of speed, personalization, and quality. Okay, so in the match, so you've got to match, like the match has to be spot on. So if you said that if your folks told you that was the biggest problem, then you could go source that technology. But they can't be hey, we have a problem and it starts with sourcing and it ends with outplacement. It's like that's probably 25 different technologies that are best of breed that can solve all of those problems along the way. Internal mobility, reference checking, this, that, and the other. Like, you can get it done. It's the hardest thing I think that people deal with right now is the 25 different solutions talking to each other.
Well, that's just it. And you've got there have been a couple of companies that I have spoken with that say, okay, so we're the intersection between this software and this software. And then you've got extensions, right, for different software or software companies that have created extensions for like LinkedIn and Google extensions or whatnot.
Oh, yeah. And they help you source because it's on top. It's a layer on top. Then you go to LinkedIn and it augments that data, that experience. Again, great. Does that data then go into your ATS or into your recruitment marketing? Let's start there. Does it go into your recruitment marketing? Then you send messages out. Then it's in a CRM and they're on a cadence. And then it goes, and finally they apply for a job. And then they apply for a job, it goes in the ATS. Great. Is all that stuff tied together in a seamless way?
But you made a comment a while ago about candidates that are hired that stay or don't stay. That has nothing to do with software.
Nothing to do with, well, yes and no. Because you mentioned the softer side of like, okay, culture and the experience, the employee experience, because it could be a big turnoff, or what we said in recruiting doesn't match what the experience that they have post-hire. Some of that is and can be technology where the match is based on resiliency. And it's based on not only the skills that they have, but can they adapt and can they handle change? So there's a technology part of that you can solve for. But in recruiting, if we tell them the CEO's fantastic, the team's fantastic, everything is awesome, one of those types of bill, and they get in and find out this is nothing like what they told me it was like, that's not technology. Yeah, that's just old-fashioned. That's just good old-fashioned leading someone into something that they probably would have never said yes to. So I think
that's interesting. Yeah, that's true.
There's a technology.
So there's a little blip then with the software. I mean,
oh yeah.
So now do you have to buy more software though for behavioral interviewing?
Oh, 100%.
You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%.
So now you've got added just another layer just now based on what you're saying, right?
You should. I mean, again, if the goal is you want them to stay, then you have to find out exactly what's important to them and be honest about where you are. Most people can handle it. Most people, if you tell them in recruiting, it's like, hey, listen, this is the deal. The last manager left because of these reasons. The team's a little disheveled. This is where the problems are. You got a great project that you're going to be working on. You'll have to do some work in terms of team chemistry. Most people can handle the truth. Maybe not everybody, but most people would rather know, okay, tell me that. Now I know what I'm getting myself into. Okay. But if you don't tell them, or worse than that, you tell them the opposite, then there's resentment. And I think this is why you see a lot of on Reddit and other places like that, you see a lot of backlash against recruiters, is because it's candidates that went through a process. They weren't lied to. I won't go that far. It's lying via omission. So there's overt lying, right? Like, I'm going to tell you my wall is black. Okay, my wall's not black. But I want to tell you that that's a bald-faced lie. Now, there's the I'm just not going to tell you the truth part of lying via omission. And I think that's what you see bubbling up in Reddit and other places like that, is people that have been burned by recruiters by not just tell the truth. I mean, if the truth hurt, this is, I think, the hardest decision for a recruiter to make in their career is, are you a company advocate or are you a candidate advocate? Like, whose interest do you represent? And I think for me, the best recruiters that I've ever been around are the ones that say, I'm a candidate advocate. I'm going to tell them the truth. And even if the truth isn't pretty.
There was a company years ago called Management Recruiters. I don't know if they're still around or not.
Was that MRI?
Yeah, MRI.
Yeah.
They came to On Semiconductor, I don't know, it was I think in 2000, 2001, something like that. And On had paid them to train us on behavioral interviewing. And no, it was actually pretty cool because I remember they had taught us Parla. Do you remember Parla?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Parla.
Oh,
You
yeah.
find the problem. What's the action? What's the results? Learned. What did you learn from the experience? And how does this example apply to an organization? I think is how it went.
Application. Yeah.
So anyway, that was kind of like the mindset that they trained us in. When we interviewed candidates, we would ask them about a situation or problem that they had with a company that they had worked for. And what did they do in that situation? What action did they take, right? And then based on that problem, how did they handle it? What happened? What were the results, right? So we had to go through that in order to do our own behavioral interview. And there was nothing software related to it. They trained us so that we could take notes on how the person responded to those questions. And it really did help us. But then as we have evolved with software, now there's software that kind of does that. And in fact, there was a company years ago that asked me to demo their software, and it was software that they were going to sell to companies. So before a company even brought somebody in for an interview, the candidates had to take this behavioral interview test before they even, to kind of flesh out, like you're saying, to flesh out people who couldn't handle.
I've seen that actually move over into bots, conversational bots.
Yeah.
Where they build all that conditional logic into it to where it's asking you questions, and based on your responses, it then asks you follow-up questions. I think, for me, as you were telling me that story, what it reminded me of, think of the arrogance that we had in the early odds and how we put ourselves in a situation where we were like, you'd be lucky to join our team. You'd be lucky to join our team.
Oh my gosh.
That was so many
the
people,
attitude. Yeah.
Right? Remember that? So it's like, I still think that some people behave that way. Instead of saying, we'd be lucky to have you, like, our business would change. Like, you would leave a lasting impact by being here. Like, when did we make that shift, and why did we make that shift? But the hubris that maybe not hubris, but the arrogance that we had back then, we're asking these questions. Think about just what were the questions we were asking. Tell me about a problem that you had. Instead of, hey, listen, here's some of the problems that we have. How do you see yourself fixing this?
Oh, perfect. Perfect.
You know what I'm saying?
Okay, now here, I have a question for you,
head.
though. But is that part of sourcing, now that we've separated the two, or is that part of recruiting?
Oh, it's definitely a part of recruiting. Yeah. You got to find the talent. Again, if we do the kind of the strictest, lines of demarcation, someone's got to find the people.
Right.
Someone's got to find the talent and make sure that they fit the criteria. And then someone's got to then work them through the gauntlet. And I think that gauntlet, instead of it being employer-centric, I think it needs to be candidate-centric. So I think that change, and those that do that already, it's not new. Those that then say, hey, we found you. Thank God. We found you. Now, let us tell you about everything that's, right and wrong with our company and our team, et cetera. And we want you to join our team. We absolutely love you, and we want you to join our team. We'll do anything. Like, what can we do?
Yeah.
Those companies that make that kind of distinction, where there is no such thing as employer-driven market or candidate-driven market. It's just talent. And the talent at this stage with Gen Z and millennials, I think they are different than when we grew up. We would just take a job. And if the job sucked, we just stay in the job. They're unwilling to do that.
I know.
Millennials,
Well, look how many people stayed in jobs, their whole entire career. One company, one, well, maybe not one job, but one company.
Yeah, well,
with
my
different
dad did.
transitions of, yeah.
Yeah, that's gone.
Yeah, no kidding.
And that's okay. If you can still stay in a company for a very long time, if the company keeps giving you new opportunities. So there's nothing wrong with staying at, let's say, AT&T, and you stay at AT&T for 10 years or 15 years or 20 years. There's nothing wrong with that. It's, did they keep just putting new stuff in front of you? Hey, you've done a really good job with this. Can you come over here and solve this problem? Okay, you did a great job with this. Can you come over here and solve this problem? There's nothing wrong with that. But
No,
companies normally don't do that. The talent withers on the vine and gets so bored at one point, disenfranchised, that they just started looking outside. You lose that talent.
And when did the layoffs start happening? I remember there was a lot of layoffs that were happening in the early 2000s, maybe even the late 1990s. I remember when Motorola broke up here in Arizona. There was a lot of shifting around and whatnot. And that's where we wanted to talk about also on this call, outplacement companies. But I remember though working at Motorola, and they started having people shifting around. And then that's when there were some like 3 or 4 really key outplacement companies that came up. And they started helping people then to transition. Now, those companies are still around. I know there's 2 or 3, but you don't hear about them like you used to.
Well, there's more technology. So irony of ironies. Here's the thing about onboarding. There's 3 relationships you can have with a company. You could be a candidate, an employee, or alumni. So where we used to, when we do terminations or RIFs or, again, for cause or not cause, it's how do you handle that gracefully, and how do you learn as much as you can, and how do you get that person on to their next greatest adventure? So what we saw in like George Clooney's film Up in the Air was a very methodical, almost chemical approach to terminations, right? Heartless, soulless, kind of like doesn't really matter what's going on in your life. This is just a business decision. You're a rounding error, and just kind of get on or get away. So the outplacement stuff is a moment in time when you can have a new relationship with a former employee. So you can do an exit interview. You can figure out like, okay, we have this technology. We have access to this technology. We have access to these consulting firms, et cetera, placement firms. We want you. You're not going to be here, but we want you to get on to your next adventure. So do you need help with your resume? Do you need help with training? Do you need skills development? The better you treat them, I think the more your employer brand it says about you. Because it's really easy to treat people exceptional in the recruiting process. It's like the romance phase, right? So we treat them really, really well. When they become employees, we kind of do, we kind of don't. Okay, it's kind of a mixed bag of nuts. And when they're former employees, we just jettison them and we don't think about them again. And I think the better companies take that opportunity and flip it on its head and say, no. Yeah, you're going to leave. However, we're going to make you more appealable or get you onto a next gig so that you look back at your time with us and think, what, it didn't work out, but they got me onto this new thing and I'm even happier.
Right. Well, I'm curious about something though. So Who's using outplacement companies now? When we were hearing about all the Google layoffs and Facebook layoffs and that type of thing last year, that was just last year. Were they working with outplacement firms with their employees?
Some of it is brought internal. So they have outplacement, like a division that runs their alumni and runs the outplacement services. So you can do a lot of this stuff internally if you want to build it. They still have some of those firms that you mentioned, some of the folks that did it as more consulting. And then you've got a whole layer of, like I'm thinking about EA and Enterprise Alumni is a software play, and it does nothing but help you manage your alumni.
Really?
Yeah, that's the whole purpose of its being. And
I never heard of this before.
Yeah, Emma Sinclair runs it, and it is fantastic. That's all they do. But what they do is I think it's just wonderful for the experience. Again, we talk about candidate experience, employee experience. Why don't we talk about alumni experience?
Wow.
Someone's going to at one point leave for whatever reason. They're moving on, they're retiring, they're whatever, they're moving on to the next faculty. Why aren't we putting a whole lot of attention around their experience? So there is, again, you can do it internally, you can do it with consulting firms, you can do it with technology, but it's being done. Right. To your point and to your question.
But do they still call it outplacement, or they call it something different now? Because I don't hear the term outplacement being used.
Yeah, it is kind of an older term. Yeah, it's probably a cadre of terms that are being thrown against it. Like, I think alumni.
And I think companies were using outplacement firms to come in and help transition employees during layoffs and whatnot, especially, again, people who had been working for the company for years, who hadn't written a resume, who hadn't interviewed, who had no idea how to look for a job or how to interview or any of that. They were just, so I think it helped them with that transition.
100%.
But they didn't help them necessarily. I think that they did set up some job fairs. Now that I'm going back several years. Some of the outplacement firms did help set up job fairs or participate in job fairs.
They did. Now a lot of that's done virtually. So when they do that stuff, they then will go through and create a job fair and then invite all the different people to those job fairs. But they're getting them prepped for life after. If I've never been through a divorce, but what I know of divorce is the sooner the two people can get on with their lives separately and get on to being happy with maybe someone else or just with themselves, whatever, the sooner everything kind of becomes easier. When chaos happens, okay, so we can't control that. Something happens, divorce happens. Okay, getting both parties, not just one party, but both parties onto something that feels better to them. They'll probably still have the regret and some of the shame and anger and all that other stuff that comes along with divorce. However, they're going to be happy. And getting them to that happy place, I think, is the goal of any great outplacement strategy. It doesn't work here, but it can work somewhere else. You're a good person, and we're going to get you onto your next greatest adventure. And I think that not only that investment, but just the acknowledgement that they're human beings and they need to get onto their next greatest adventure, and you need to help them with that.
Well, there were so many LinkedIn posts last year from people who had lost their jobs. And I don't remember any of them talking about that kind of a transition.
Yeah, because not many companies take advantage of that opportunity.
Now there is a discussion, though, right? There is a discussion, because why aren't they? I mean, it's not like these, to your point too, a company like Enterprise Alumni. Is that going to be the new catchphrase or term, if you would, for outplacement?
Yeah, I think so. I think alumni makes sense because it's outplacement has out in the phrase. Alumni, I mean, if you hit the college or you graduated from somewhere, you feel like alumni there's a status that's associated with that. With outplacement, I think it's just a combination of words that we've outgrown. And so I think there's a better way of saying it, like the word staffing. Right. I think there's just a better way of going about it. And I think people look at, if they look at it for no other reason than look at how it impacts your employer brand, because those people that left your company are now going to be on Glassdoor. They're in LinkedIn, so you can always reach out to them. Candidates reach out to them all the time. And so, like, like, this is what I was telling people about the job search. This is a little bit dated, but basically, I did this bit at TCU, and I asked these college students, whole room of college students, like, how do you do your job search now? Like, what do you do? All right, we go to Google. Okay, that totally tracks. Good. We go to Glassdoor. Okay, yep, tracks. Totally understand. And then we go to LinkedIn, and we look up former employees, not current employees. Former employees, and we send them a message. And would you go work for this company again? So it's a NPS type of question. Are you referenceable? This is like a decade ago, Denise. Like, so think about how more advanced they are now. They're not, the job seeker is so, they've got all this transparency. They can go find all your former employees and ask them questions. So if you don't want to do it because it's moral or ethical or maybe even a good business decision, do it for your own self-interest, because your candidates, the savvy ones, are going to talk to former employees. The better experience your former employees have leaving your firm, the better they'll say, what, it didn't work out. Had 5 good years with Motorola. They were awesome. We did some cool stuff together. We had to go up on a riff. I was one of those people affected, but what, they stepped up. And in my hour of need, they stepped up, and then they did all these things. Ding, 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 ding. They helped me. 3 months later, I was already on working for Verizon, doing this other bit. Super happy in Verizon. Like, they're telling a hero story to a candidate.
Correct. I remember when Motorola broke up, some of their business went to, their government business went to General Dynamics. Their components business went to On Semiconductor. Some of their other semiconductor business went to Freescale. And so people were kind of moving around that way. I mean, there were some people I'm sure that were affected. But going back to what happened last year with all the layoffs, again, it's interesting now that we're having this conversation to think about how many people were posting negative comments about their employer.
All could be avoided.
All could be avoided.
All could be avoided.
Had they helped them? Had they helped them with the transition, like you said, bringing something in internally, or a contract? Yeah.
However, it's the sense that we need to do something here. The do something here isn't just we need to lay off 10% or 15% or whatever the riff is. The action that has to go through the C-suite and the board's mind is, how do we get those folks that are affected? How do we treat them with empathy and humanity, and in a humane way, get them to their next greatest adventure? Because it didn't work out here. And yeah, it's super easy to do the math in Excel and like, hey, we need to cut this many people. Okay, that's easy. It's hard for someone then to think, how do we then help
them to transition?
And I think those are the leaders that I most adore.
Well, not only that, people keep talking about, all right, well, if AI is going to take over my job in sourcing, what's going to happen to me? Well, obviously, just in this conversation alone, we see a whole new business opportunity that could be cropping up for the talent acquisition industry.
That's dead on. It's looking for the humanity, because the moment of humanity we used to think in sourcing was, we find the talent, we call them. Okay, that's gone, and there's elements of recruiting, there's elements with hiring managers that you don't need to do, but there is moments where the humanity needs to be human, and it needs to be something that's heavily emphasized. And this, again, we've talked about outplacement. In this sense, it's like, you have a choice. You can treat people like humans, or you can treat them like disposable products.
But and then you brought up another really great point, though, too. How many of those companies, once they have had this reduction in force, as they are growing their business again, or finding ways to sustain maybe products and services in their organizations, all of a sudden now oh my gosh, maybe we need to hire back some of our staff. If you have treated them well, The first
Ding.
time. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And
And
the
there's
thing,
alumni groups too, right? All
oh yeah,
over
oh
LinkedIn.
yeah, and they're alumni groups, but they're not run by the companies. Generally
No,
speaking,
they're
they're
run
by
by the
people.
alumni.
That's right. They're run by the alumni, which again, missed opportunity. You just nailed something. It's that experience. How did you treat me when we had some dark days? That happens in life. Like, it's not all sunflowers and rainbows. So like, you're gonna have some dark days. How do you step up? What's your character in those moments when it's the darkest? And if you can then pull empathy out and treat someone really well, and all of a sudden a year later go back to them and say, Janet, hey, listen, A, it sucks since you've not been here. B, we'd love to have you back. We'd absolutely love to. And I know it's a big ask, but would you consider it? You have half a chance. No, you have more than a better chance to bring Janet back if you treated her well.
Yeah,
You have
yeah.
no chance.
Yeah, and we were
Zero.
doing a search for one of our semiconductor equipment companies a couple of years ago, and they wanted to bring back the female technical talent that had left, right? And
Good
and
luck.
actually, we actually did fairly well bringing some of
Good.
them back
Good.
because I think some of the women had left that they were seeking because they saw maybe the grass was greener on the other side if they left the company for a
Yeah.
better opportunity,
Oh,
more
that's a different. Yeah.
salary,
Yeah.
higher
Yeah.
salaries, things like that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was interesting because they did treat the employees well while they were there. So it wasn't a tough search
Okay.
to get some of those
Okay.
people back.
Okay.
And then
I
there was
like hearing that.
yep, and there was another company though that we did some work for about probably 5 or 6 years ago. They were looking for a specific type of talent, and we could not find that talent other than people who had worked there because they were so niche. Their
Oh,
specific,
yeah.
engineering talent. So what we did was we went back and started finding people who had worked there before, but we asked them, why did you leave? And they had, at the time that they left, they didn't like the management. Well, thank
Ah,
goodness the management had changed.
yeah.
So
Yeah.
now they were willing to come back because there was new management and the other management had left. So there
Right.
were
Now
other
you have an
reasons.
opportunity.
Yeah.
You have an opportunity, especially if you unearth why they left. You have an opportunity. And again, we could have captured all of that stuff in their exit interview.
And
And
exit interview. Perfect.
like, why are you leaving? And if they tell us the truth, say, hey, listen, I have a better opportunity. It's paying more. And three, even if those two things weren't it, I don't really like the leadership, or I don't like the manager. Okay. Hey, totally get it. No hate. Thank you so much. You go on to your next greatest adventure. Now you got an opportunity to go back and look at that employee file and you go, okay, was getting more money, et cetera. Oh, by the way, they don't like the manager. That manager is no longer here. It's
Right.
a perfect person to
Right.
go and source.
Right. Exactly. Well, not only that, I think exit interviews, and that's a great, add on here because exit interviews are so important. And any company who's not doing exit interviews, take note. You need to, right?
And stay interviews. I like stay interviews, periodic stay interviews, maybe once a quarter, once every 6
You mean like
months.
a survey, like a pulse survey type of
Yeah.
thing?
Yeah.
Okay.
A stay interview is the reverse of an exit interview. So the exit interview is why are you leaving? A stay interview is why are you staying? Yeah. So it's why are you staying? And so you get the employee to then say, I like the fact that we have flexibility, or I like the fact that, I get to talk to my team every week, or whatever the bit is, but there's some reasoning around why they stay.
What's keeping you here? Yeah.
If you ask them, they'll tell you. An exit interview, some people won't be honest in an exit interview because they don't want to burn a bridge, right? So, the data is good, but not great.
But what
But
if
a
it's
stay interview,
but what if it doesn't have what if they created the exit interviews though to where the person's name wasn't on there? That it was
well,
anonymous.
that helps you get the data of why the change, right? But then you wouldn't be able to use that to source that talent. So that was a tough one. But
Yeah, that is a tough
stay
one.
interviews, I think the more you look at those, I think the more you'll fall in love with them for the reasons of like, hey, it could be random stuff. Like, we have great childcare, or we have great, vision benefits. Like, you'd have never known if you don't ask.
That's right.
So
That's
ask.
right. So what do you think the difference is between a stay interview, though, and a pulse survey as to why somebody or how happy somebody is in their current role? Because I know that wasn't it Workday that had created, or somebody had created a pulse survey on the talent management side. I remember hearing for one of our clients that were using them.
They've got there's a tons of Workday, I think, has something like that. But the thing with a pulse survey, it's almost like when you go through an airport and you see the little smiley faces on how was your experience, like what was your mood. They can tell you things, but they don't give you specifics. I'm looking for more details. In a stay interview, that person has to list something. In a pulse survey, which again, in combination. So let's not think of these as binary, like you pick one or you pick one. No, you can do both. You can do stay interviews and pulse surveys where once a week it's asking one question. So these don't have to be things that we pit against each other. We can do them in conjunction with one another.
Oh man, great conversation. Great conversation too, especially around this enterprise alumni.
Yeah, great company.
Yeah. Anything else you can think of that we should?
I think we covered. We've fixed everything. That's what we did today.
We're going to
take on world hunger next week.
Okay, you're fabulous. You're fabulous. This is great.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for having me as a guest.
Thank you. This has been a fabulous conversation. Yeah, let's have others.
Done.
Let's meet up again.
I would like that very much.
All right. Thanks, William.
All right. Take care.
All right.